let's get into this. I want to talk about how trust among Americans is on the decline. And that's American to American. Political polarization is leading to so much disdain that many people won't befriend or live near those with opposing views. Now, I think personally, I think this is debatable. Okay. A lot of people are moving to red states, no matter their politics. Red states have a lot of deregulation. They're not as safe as they could be, but they're affordable. And someplace that makes them affordable. Now, that's not to say I'm not justifying it. I think that you can have regulations and affordability. I do think that. But the places that are safer attract a lot of people who just buy everything up. They already had a lot of money, and you get to a point where you're living somewhere and you realize, wow, if I wanted to buy a house right now, I wouldn't be able to afford to live here, but I already live here. So people are moving around. And I don't necessarily think that trust of your neighbor comes into play in all cases. But what do I know? We should be relying on experts. And so in his research, James L. Gibson, a political scientist at Washington University in St. Louis, finds that this distrust is worse than it was at the height of the McCarthy era Red Scare. So I guess bad enough. He describes how it causes a spiral of silence. I keep wanting to say a spiral of science. I don't think there is such a thing. And that is a term that is coined by German political scientist Elizabeth Noel Newman back in the 1970s. The spiral occurs when individuals who express a view or a controversial issue on a controversial issue are met with vigorous criticism from an aggressive minority, quote unquote. As people begin to self-censor, they're less likely to encounter support from those who may privately agree. They may also come to believe that they are in the minority when, in fact, they're part of the majority. To Gibson, this dynamic distorts political debate. As more people hold back their views, it allows the aggressive minority to dominate. We also call them the vocal minority. These are the people online hiding behind the anonymity provided by the internet, who are trolling, flooding the zone, being reposted and retweeted by politicians and people like Donald Trump Jr., using them as attack dogs, in a sense. And they sound a lot louder than they are in numbers, okay? There's less to be afraid of. Their bark is worse than their bite. But it allows them to, in a sense, dominate when we self-censor and go quiet because we don't feel like debating, we don't feel like arguing. Now, we're going to read an article by Gibson, but I just want to let you know, after the article, I do have my own opinions about debating or not, okay? And I have personal advice because I am one of those people who will engage but will not debate. I feel no need to provide evidence for my stance. More and more, we live in a world where I personally believe if you don't know what's going on for real, buddy, that is on you. And the burden of proof is not lying on my shoulders. But Gibson writes, true public opinion and expressed public opinion diverge. But above all, the free-ranging debate so necessary to democratic politics is stifled. Now, again, I love this article. There are things that I may take issue with, so I'll stop every now and then to do that. But, and this is not the only article we're going to look at. Stick around for the Democratic Party meltdown because of the New York mayoral primary that just took place, where Zoran Mandami emerged victorious on the night of. That's still pretty cool. But I'll talk along the way about how, is this really up to the voters? Is this really up to you and I? Is it up to us to like, okay, yeah, maybe we shouldn't self-censor, but what's the opposite of that? What's the expectation of us? Are we supposed to be in the streets, like, beyond the protesting that we're already doing? I mean, I don't think the recent protest is a form of self-censoring. If you're talking about sitting around the break room at work, that's probably more a matter of priorities. If you're talking to a good friend who keeps saying they're independent because they don't want to admit they're a Republican, okay, then maybe you want to have that conversation with them, but doesn't need to be a debate. Does one person need to be dominant? Can't you both be heard? Can't you say, okay, I hear you, let me say what I think? And why does it have to be somebody comes out on top? So I kind of take issue with that stance that self-censoring is a means of losing. But if there is a silent majority, maybe it shouldn't be so silent. And so thank God for the votes that we're seeing, and thank God, I don't believe in God, but thank goodness for the protests that we're having. But anyway, let's get into this article so that we can, as I was saying, rely on the experts. So we're going to theconversation.com. This is one of the greatest websites on the internet for your news and information. These are ad-free articles, essays, excerpts from scientific studies by the academics, the professors, the scientists themselves, okay? They always provide transparency. It's right there under the byline, so you know if they have any sort of there should be no question that the person providing this information to you doesn't have a conflict of interest. There should be no question. And if they are somehow related to the industry, not just the field, but the industry that they're talking about or promoting, you should know that. And the conversation does an excellent job of doing that. I'm going to continue my little ad for theconversation.com here because I read a lot of stuff, and this is one of the best. You can curate what they provide in your inbox. I have the conversation giving me all the AI articles in one email. I have the conversation giving me all the politics, all the international politics, all the cultural and arts. You can curate how they provide articles and essays to you. So I highly recommend it. All right, this one. Self-censorship and the spiral of silence, why Americans are less likely to publicly voice their opinions on political issues. This is by James L. Gibson. For decades, Americans' trust in one another has been on the decline, according to the most recent General Social Survey. A major factor in that downshift has been the concurrent rise in the polarization between the two major political parties. Supporters of Republicans and Democrats are far more likely than in the past to view the opposite side with distrust. Now, I will be commenting on that specifically. Okay, just want to put a pin in that right now. That political polarization is so stark that many Americans are now unlikely to have friendly social interactions, live nearby, or congregate with people from opposing camps, according to one recent study. I could comment on just about every paragraph in this, but I just want to point out that this isn't a new dynamic to politics. It may be happening more and more in relation to politics, but there are lots of things that divide us. There are lots of things that keep us from congregating. For instance, congregation is a word that I associate with churches. You could say that denomination is segregation, okay? We all break up into our little groups or whatever. There's lots of reasons to do that. It's just becoming more polarized with politics than ever before, okay? But I think what we need to be addressing here is that social dynamic of not letting that happen versus, and looking at why it's happening is part of figuring that out, how to prevent it. But I choose to believe that we can communicate and that we can keep our so-called differences from being divisive. Our differences, as long as somebody's opinion isn't, rooted in racism and bigotry, yeah, we can probably hear each other out and say, you know what? We don't have to win a debate here. I'm going to think about what you said. You think about what I said. If you ever want to talk about it again, we can do that. Meanwhile, what do you want to do today? This whole idea that the only reason people hang out is to bitch and moan at each other is a little silly, right? And I'm not saying the article's making that case, but if it's true that we're afraid to be around people that we disagree with, then what you have literally nothing else in common with those people. It's like I always point out, my right-wing neighbor from back in the day loved Star Trek. That's a little weird because there's nothing right-wing about it except for the bad guys. So, at least we could talk about our favorite actor on Star Trek without our politics coming into it. Social scientists often refer to this sort of animosity as affective polarization, meaning that people not only hold conflicting views on many or most political issues, but also disdain fellow citizens who hold different opinions. Over the past few decades, such affective polarization in the U.S. has become commonplace. There's lots of links in this. I would love to give you the link so that you could hit all of those sublinks. The one downside of the conversation is their links are massive and it will not fit in the description. So if you want to know about this, feel free to email me, theletterhack@gmail.com. That's theletterhack@gmail.com. That address is also available in the description of every one of my personal YouTube videos and live streams on youtube.com/theletterhack. You can also join my Discord. Links to that in the description of this live stream or, yesterday's live stream. You can find my information. I'd be glad to share this article with you. Polarization undermines democracy by making the essential process of democratic deliberation, discussion, negotiation, compromise, and bargaining over public policies difficult, if not impossible. Because polarization extends so broadly and deeply, some people have become unwilling to express their views until they've confirmed they're speaking with someone who's like-minded. I'm a political scientist, and I found that Americans were far less likely to publicly voice their opinion than even during the height of the McCarthy era Red Scare. Now, I get that. If you're just in public, if you're just around somebody and you don't know them, they're total strangers, and somebody's talking about their politics, I'm not sure I would engage with that person. They feel a little too comfortable talking about what they think around people, right? But if you were going to do that, like let's say it was a fairly harmless situation and somebody was just saying something kind of off the cuff and you wanted to counter it, maybe have some prepared responses instead of going silent. But I understand why somebody would go silent in that way. Comparing it to the McCarthy era in the Red Scare is a little bit like, that's more like there's a threat that you're going to be reported. It's more like there's a threat that, ICE is going to transcend immigration and just be like a legit Gestapo they are, but like they would make a new logo and have a new name for that department. But like this makes the case that people are living in fear of something that isn't exactly happening right now, as if you could be reported as a commie, right? Or as if you could be reported in some way just as a Democrat or a lib, and they would come and get you, or they would find ways to censor you, or suddenly you're paying more in taxes, or your personal groceries are more expensive. I don't know, whatever it could be. I think that what we're actually talking about here is this fear state that we live in. And again, that has less to do with me saying what I think and more to do with living under American fascism, a regime that is apparently willing to go to great lengths to suppress our right to free speech. The muting of the American voice. According to a 2022 book written by political scientist Taylor Carlson and Jamie E. Settle, fears about speaking out are grounded in concerns about social sanctions for expressing unwelcome views. And I love that an unwelcome view could be, I think we all deserve health care. I think we all deserve better wages. Like, who in their right mind is like, hey, that where your views are unwelcome here? I don't get that. It's like, why does rent always go up, but the apartment or the house that I rent doesn't improve? Right? How come the value's gone up, but I don't see any evidence that it's more valuable? Why is that? Hey. Those views are not welcome here. I don't think if that is the case, there's other dynamics at play. And this withholding of views extends across a broad range of social circumstances. In 2022, for instance, I conducted a survey of a representative sample of about 1,500 residents of the U.S. I found that while 45% of the respondents were worried about expressing their views to members of their immediate family, this percentage ballooned to 62% when it came to speaking out publicly in one's community. Nearly half of those surveyed said they felt less free to speak their minds than they used to. About 3 to 4 times more Americans said they did not feel free to express themselves. Excuse me. And that's compared with the number of those who said so during the McCarthy era. Censorship in the U.S. and globally. Since that survey, attacks on free speech have increased markedly, especially under the Trump administration. There you go. Issues such as the Israeli war in Gaza, activist campaigns against wokeism, and the ever-increasing attempts to penalize people for expressing certain ideas have made it more difficult for people to speak out. The breadth of self-censorship in the U.S. in recent times is not unprecedented or unique to the U.S. Indeed, research in Germany, Sweden, and elsewhere have reported similar increases in self-censorship in the past several years. In the 1970s, Elizabeth Noel Neumann, a distinguished German political scientist, coined the term the spiral of silence to describe how self-censorship arises and what its consequences can be. Informed by research she conducted on the 1965 West German federal election, Noel Neumann observed that an individual's willingness to publicly give their opinion was tied to their perceptions of public opinion on an issue. The so-called spiral happens when someone expresses a view on a controversial issue and then encounters vigorous criticism from an aggressive minority, perhaps even sharp attacks. A listener can impose cost on the speaker for expressing the view in a number of ways, including criticism, direct personal attacks, and even attempts to cancel the speaker through ending friendships or refusing to attend social events such as Thanksgiving or holiday dinners. This kind of sanction isn't limited to just social interactions, but also when someone is threatened by far bigger institutions, from corporations to the government. The speaker learns from this encounter and decides to keep their mouth shut in the future because the cost of expressing the view are simply too high. Now, if you're expressing a view and you get attacks from somebody, maybe kick them out of your social event. Maybe tell them they're not invited to Thanksgiving next time instead of unilaterally disarming. Instead of saying, well, if that's how it's going to be here, I'm not going to show up. They go, fine. No. Don't take the high road. You be aggressive. You go, hey, man, if you're just going to be a dick every time somebody tries to have a difference of opinion, how about you don't come here anymore? Nobody has to be here. If you're so unhappy, I'm not unhappy. Well, you sound pretty unhappy. How come nobody can talk without you getting mad? But I'll talk more about how I personally deal with that in a moment. This kind of sanction, make sure I didn't read that. This kind of sanction isn't limited to just social interactions, but also when someone is threatened by far bigger institutions, from corporations to the government. The speaker learns from this encounter and decides to keep their mouth shut in the future because the costs of expressing the views are simply too high. This self-censorship has knock-on effects as views become less commonly expressed and people are less likely to encounter support from those who hold similar views, people come to believe that they are in the minority, even if they are, in fact, in the majority. This belief then also contributes to an unwillingness to express one's views, like at all. The consequences for democratic deliberation. The tendency toward self-censorship means listeners are deprived of hearing the withheld views. The marketplace of ideas becomes skewed. The choice of buyers in the marketplace are circumscribed. The robust debate so necessary to deliberations in a democracy is squelched as the views of a minority come to be seen as the only acceptable political views. Now, this is where, the anonymity of the internet comes in handy. This is where you can rely on social media. This is where you can go on Twitter and say your views and retweet things that align with your views. But we're talking about in public here, I guess, in face-to-face, in person, which is good because we have to get offline. No better example of this can be found than in the absence of debate in the contemporary U.S. about the treatment of the Palestinians by the Israelis, whatever outcome such vigorous discussions might produce. Fearful of consequences, many people are withholding their views on Israel, whether Israel has committed war crimes, for instance, or whether Israeli members of government should be sanctioned, because they fear being branded as anti-Semitic. Many Americans are also biting their tongue when it comes to DEI, affirmative action, and even whether political tolerance is essential for democracy. But the dominant views are also penalized by this spiral. By not having to face their competitors, they lose the opportunity to check their beliefs and, if confirmed, bolster and strengthen their arguments. Good ideas lose the chance to become better, while bad ideas, such as something as extreme as Holocaust denial, are given space to flourish. The spiral of silence, therefore, becomes inimical to pluralistic debate, discussion, and ultimately to democracy itself. Don't debate. That's my advice. Instead, go into interview mode. Ask someone who's, just spouting what they believe. Just imagine the scenario. This probably happens to you pretty frequently. Let's just say it's someone you know. It's at a family gathering, a barbecue. It's summer. It's barbecue. I personally love springtime. I get so excited for springtime. I wet my plants, but it is summer, so let's just stick with that. So, you're at a barbecue. There's family there. Here's your right-wing uncle. He's trying to engage you in debate. Go into interviewer mode and ask him, where did you hear that? You ask him that enough, and you'll realize they are parroting Fox News more often than not. You'll realize that all the things they're saying are just talking points. Okay? Where'd you hear that? Where'd you hear that? Well, if they're annoyed by you asking that, why are they talking? You say, no, I want to know. Where did you read that somewhere? Where'd you hear that? What's the source? One, you better have one. Two, is it the same one? Because now they're exposing themselves. And if they start to back away, well, good. Let them have a spiral of silence. And then you can start talking about what you want to say. And if they want to debate, go, look, I'm not here to debate, but I got this from this article. Here's where I heard this guy, the Letterhacks, on YouTube. Check him out. Right? Just pass the buck. Here am I. Let me stand in your path, right? Let me take over from here. Give them your source. So look, don't hesitate to ask them to elaborate or provide evidence. If you know them well enough, ask them flat out if they have any original thoughts on the topic at all, or if they're just going to keep repeating what some millionaire talking head told them was the truth or the facts. And go, really? So now it's okay to believe whatever they say on the news? Give me a break. There's one outlet. There's only right-wing news. Only conservative media is worth listening to. None of it's worth listening to. How about that? How about all mainstream media is horseshit? And you shouldn't be paying attention to any of it, much less picking up where they left off. And they tout how many people watch their shit. They don't need you out there doing their job for free. Okay, what are you, an unpaid intern for Fox? Get a grip. Make it personal in that way. Give them a little bit of humility. Give them a chance to go, yeah, I'm sitting out here trying to sound like some sort of political scientist, and all I did was watch Fox News all day yesterday. And one thing I'm always doing is pointing out the very talking points some use are specifically meant to divide us, to make us argue instead of starting a conversation based on common ground. So if somebody wants to offer their quote unquote views, let's say on politics, and that's something that you want to talk about as well, but now they're attacking you for it, go, okay, look, the difference is I'm talking about what I would like to be actual policy. What you're doing is talking about why no one on my side should be allowed to have policy decisions.